Last week I spoke about some of the beautiful nishamot, the precious souls who lost their lives in the massacre that occurred on October 7th. And in this, the third of the three sermons I'm giving about my mission to Israel with the Zionist Rabbinic Coalition, which I led just a couple of weeks ago, I want to speak about some of the heroes, those who saved lives, and to offer a message of hope. Within the first hour of the attack on Shabbat HaShachor, over 3,000 rockets were fired into Israel. And it was quickly apparent that this was different from other red alerts and not the usual barrage of rockets fired indiscriminately and which our people have become used to. Thousands of terrorists trained by Hamas poured into Israel to carry out the massacre. Hundreds of innocent Gaza civilians, as they're referred to, joined the fray. One place we visited was an underground parking garage in Tel Aviv, which had been converted into a makeshift operation where volunteers worked to distribute the massive collections of donations that people had sent from all around the country. Areas were designated for everything from clothes to bicycles, massive piles of food and toys, all waiting to be packed and distributed to the soldiers on the front lines and to the people who were displaced and living in temporary housing. A sophisticated, high-tech system in operation takes requests and then matches them with supplies to fill the orders, and they're sent to bases all around the country and to the homeless. Because in addition to the over 1,200 who were killed on October 7th and the 240 hostages who were kidnapped by Hamas, hundreds of thousands of Israelis who lived in the south were displaced by the burning and the destruction of their homes in their kibbutzim and in their villages near Gaza and have nowhere to live. Less well known and underreported is the fact that in addition to them, due to the tensions with Hezbollah and concern for their safety, tens of thousands of residents in the north have been uprooted and are temporarily housed in hotels around the country. Tamara Chaimav, a bundle of energy, flew back to Israel from Italy as soon as the war broke out, knowing she had to do something. She immediately pitched in and helped to organize the effort of Aaron's Angels, one of many similar operations around the country. This one, named after a young man who was killed in a previous conflict with Hamas. She directs hundreds of volunteers who come every day to do what they can to help to alleviate the suffering brought on by the war. And that is where I donated, by the way, the hats that were knitted by women here in our congregation. We met the head of emergency and disaster services at Barzilai Hospital, who had just retired after 43 years, but was now called out of retirement to oversee emergency operations. Being near Gaza, the hospital had trained and was prepared for what to do in the case of mass casualties when 50 people need to be treated all at once. But they had no way of anticipating the extent of the disaster that occurred on October 7th. Within the first hour alone, between 50 to 60 people were brought in need of immediate urgent medical care. Overwhelmed on an unprecedented scale, the likes of which they had never seen before, they quickly discharged 300 patients and moved other patients in order to make room for the new arrivals. He told us of the extraordinary work being done by special teams of social workers and psychologists, not to take care of the patients, but to take care of the staff who was hurting over what they were seeing. In his village of some 300 families, the terrorist went on a rampage and killed dozens of people. And in what he described as a miracle, which I referred to last week, they skipped his home, sparing his life, and thereby allowing him to go to work to save the lives of others. The same day, the Sheba Hospital in Gaza was hit. Remember that one that turned out not to be hit by Israel, but instead from a Palestinian misfire, and where suddenly the number of casualties dropped from 500 to a handful. Well, on that same day, a Hamas rocket hit and completely destroyed a hospital near Ashkelon that helps children with special needs. I don't recall hearing about that. Prior to the war, he had worked with the Gaza Health Ministry on a number of joint programs, including the training of Palestinian doctors and treating between 10 to 15 patients a day from Gaza. All of which is now over. Yet another victim of Hamas hatred. Alone, our escort on Kibbutz Kfar Aza, who along with his extended family had been a member of the kibbutz, told us that on October 7, he was looking forward to a ritual they do every year on Simchat Torah. They would fly colorful flights across the border into Gaza as a sign of peace. And I couldn't help but think what a marked contrast this was to the incendiary kites flown from Gaza into Israel with explosives attached, and which they hoped would be picked up by Israeli children and explode in their arms. He choked up when he told us that the kite festival didn't happen this year and asked us to think about the number of children in the kibbutz who were orphaned by the attacks. It took several weeks to go through the homes on Kibbutz Kfar Aza. First, the army would come through to make sure there were no terrorists still hiding inside. Then a bomb squad would have to enter to clear any bombs or booby traps that might have been left out in there to explode. Then Zaka, the volunteers from the ultra-religious community who collected body parts and any drop of blood that may have been shed, came in to do their work. It took almost 3 months to clean the kibbutz of the residue of blood. But the most miraculous story of all, the one that I want to conclude with, the most amazing one, was a simple guy named Rabbi David Dian, who has become a national hero. Early that fateful Saturday morning, Rami, who had a pickup truck, which he used to supply fuel to farms in the Negev towns near the Gaza border, received a call that a friend's son was in danger and asking him to help. Without a moment's hesitation, and with no idea of the scale of Hamas's attack, he drove to the site of the rock festival. And he was shocked to see dead bodies spewed on the ground and hundreds of kids running in all directions. And somehow, miraculously, he managed to locate and find his friend's son, who quickly jumped into his truck, as did 15 other people who piled in, some climbing into the trunk, others on the roof of the vehicle, which at the most is designed to hold 5 people. And when he saw the extent of the massacre and how many people were in danger, he began to understand and quickly comprehended and digested the gravity of the situation. So he went back to try and rescue others. He contacted his son-in-law and told him to prepare residents of the Moshav to receive an influx of terrified, wounded, and distraught survivors as he was directing kids to go to the Moshav. Well, as word got around the country, everybody knows everybody in Israel, that this guy named Rami had extracted some kids from the vicinity of the festival, he started to get calls and texts from people he didn't know, panicked parents from all around the country, begging him to do what he could to save their loved ones. So Rami drove his little truck, he walked, he crawled, and he did whatever he could to rescue people and bring as many as he could to safety. And then, once they were safely deposited at his moshav, he would go back to the scene of the horror, risking his life to save more. Without any weapons, he did all of this. From the time he got the first call on Saturday morning until Sunday night, he didn't sleep, as he was on a mission to save as many lives as possible. In an interview with an Israeli news site, he said, "I drove back and forth between the site of the festival and the moshav for 4 hours straight without taking a break. And each time I picked up and I dropped off 10 or 12 kids. I rescued them under fire and under the nose of dozens of terrorists. I hid in the bushes, behind trees, and advanced carefully to get the kids out. I didn't act like Rambo. I did it quietly, and that's how I succeeded in saving so many." One of the women who contacted him on his cell phone, and who he did not know, desperately cried for him to help her as she was in her hiding place. She didn't know how to tell him where he was, as he was asking, "How will I find you?" And speaking by phone, he told her what he would do was to play a game of hot and cold. He said, "I will honk the horn of my car, and when you hear I'm getting close to you, then say hot. And if I'm getting further away, then you'll say cold." When he finally got to her And when he finally got out of his car and reached the ravine where she was hiding, she told him to come quickly. And he responded, Al tidagi, agia alayich, don't worry, I will get to you. And then he asked the girl, Amit, if she was alone, and she said yes. But by the time he got there, she was held at gunpoint by 6 Hamas terrorists. Unarmed again, remember that. He shouted to his captors in Arabic and quickly thought, and he said to them, Ahlan, my name is Abu Rami. I am a Muslim from Rahat, and I came to alert you that the IDF is on its way. They will soon be here. You need to run and get away fast. And then he said, let me have the girl. I'll take her because it'll just slow you guys down. They believed him, gave her to him. He put her in the car and hugged her as she was trembling, called his wife and told her, I'm bringing a girl to the Moshav. You have to treat her and hug her. She's suffering from trauma. He wound up saving 750 people. And he reflected, on that fateful day, I wasn't afraid. It was pure instinct. It was as if the hand of God had touched me and guided me to do this. To me, those children were like my own children, and I needed to get them to safety. So while he managed to save the lives of so many, sadly, his niece, Ophir Davidian, an 18-year-old female soldier who had served only 4 months in the IDF, was among the first that was tragically murdered by Hamas terrorists on her base. When asked about his motivation, Davidian humbly responded, I never thought about myself. I wasn't afraid. Even if it meant I could get shot or killed, my only goal was to help and try and save as many people as I could. So while Hamas was busy killing people, he was busy risking his life to save them. He's been widely heralded throughout the country as a national hero, and all he wants to do with his newfound fame is to raise money to establish and build a park that will be in memory of his niece who was killed, as a counterpoint to the destruction and loss of life that he witnessed. We were urged by all we met to tell the stories like this one, to let people know, like you, what we had seen, to tell of the miracles, of the heroism, of the idyllic, peaceful life of the kibbutzniks, their love of peace, and their desire not to have war, of the evil intent of Hamas, of the unity of the people, Yachad Nenatzeach, together we will win, of the need to eradicate it as a governing power, of the determination to defeat Hamas and to come back again, they said, which is why I share the stories with you and will be leading a mission from our congregation the end of March. Having been to the UAE and Bahrain, I've seen the possibility of peace with Arab nations and with Israel. Alone from the kibbutz said, as Jews, survival is in our DNA. It was a message that we heard from evacuees at the hotel where we visited them. And I sometimes wonder how a people that has been so maligned, so oppressed, so persecuted throughout our history doesn't give up on humanity. I wonder sometimes how it is that we still value life so much, how a people with so many reasons to hate, to be bitter, to be victims, refuses to succumb to despair, how we still laugh, cry, create, celebrate bat mitzvahs and bar mitzvahs as well. That is what gives me hope, inspiration, and most of all, pride in being a Jew. Ken yehi ratzono, so may it be thy will. Amen.